Hello and welcome to Project Stargate. This is your host, Mark Brenner. Today on Project Stargate, we have Profiling the Paranormal with Dr. Barry Taff. Dr. Barry Taff holds a doctorate in psychophysiology and a minor in biomedical engineering. For almost 50 years, he has researched and investigated the paranormal, everything from poltergeist phenomenon to hauntings and everything in between. Dr. Taff is one of the most amazing and prolific and incredible investigators in the history of paranormal research. Dr. Taff, welcome to Project Stargate, and thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate your bringing me on.
Absolutely, the pleasure is mine. Dr. Taff, I've read your book several times, and it's brought some things to my attention that you don't really hear from these so-called paranormal reality TV shows. And I'd like to start out, though. I'd like to give the listeners an idea of what drove you and inspired you to get into this remarkable field of research, and a little bit about why you decided to go this route versus other things in the medical field.
Okay, it's pretty simple, really. Most people get into it out of curiosity, and that was in part what drove me into it. But more so than that was, as a kid, as a child, I was having pretty much continual paranormal experiences, telepathic, clairvoyant, precognitive. I remember, and I've told the story many times that it's relevant. So bear with me here. I was 10 years old in the 5th grade, and playing recess one day. Everyone's out there doing whatever they're doing on the court. There's a little girl named Christine, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, walking towards me, and she's wearing a blue sundress with a big, flower on the top. And she's walking towards me, and suddenly my other vision kicked in. And by that I mean, you'll understand what that term means in a moment. I saw that under her dress, on her right side, there was a plastic bag and a tube going into her body. So I went up to her, not knowing anything about medicine. I said, "What's that plastic bag and tube under your dress for?" And she started screaming around and told her teacher and the principal. They dragged her in the principal's office. And the principal logically assumed that I either looked under her dress or stuck in the girl's bathroom, neither of which was true.
Right.
So I explained to him that I've got this vision that comes on every so often, like Superman's X-ray vision, and I can see through into people and through clothing. And he went, "What?" So he calls my mother, and he says, "Your son's crazy. We're gonna have to have him arrested and have him kicked out of school for a while, suspended for a while, or maybe expelled." My mother said, No, Barry can do this." And the principal went, "What?" And my mother said, "Barry can do this." The principal said to my mother, quote, "You're as crazy as your son is." And she hung up on my mother. Huh. And then he turned to me, and before he got started on his complaining and being upset with what happened, I said, "Well, you have that scar from your appendicitis, appendectomy, and it's always purple." I didn't know what the word keloid was because I wasn't educated to know that yet. I said that this scar there, and it's always purple. It's never healed very well. He turned purple and green and red, and he said, "Get out of here. If this happens one more time, I'll have you thrown out of school and arrested."
Oh, wow.
Well, it did happen, but I didn't talk about it. I kept my mouth shut.
Of course.
The day that JFK was inaugurated, 1961, January 1961, I turned to my parents. We were all watching, on TV. And I said, "He's going to die around Thanksgiving in 1963. And my parents went, "What? What's he going to die from?" "Well, he's going to be killed." "How?" I said, "I don't know. But I know that's when he's going to die." My parents went, "Yeah, right." And
Wow.
I said, "Stop saying things like that. You're crazy. You stop saying things like that." So they forgot about it, but I didn't. Told friends about it. They thought it was crazy. The years go by, and then we all know what happened on November 22nd, 1963.
Absolutely.
The assassination of JFK. And when that happened, my parents didn't talk to me for about 10 days. They were freaked out. And no, get a lot of friends who they backed off from me. I always looked very young compared to my peers. I have photos of me from when I was 13 and somewhere here, buried, in the garage. And it's my friends and I were at a party, and we were all about 13. They all looked 13. If you looked at me and didn't know who I was, you'd think I was 6. It was interesting, and I remember when I entered high school, I looked like I belonged in grammar school. And then when I entered college, it looked like I belonged in junior high school.
That can be a blessing.
But, yeah, it was interesting. Anyway, this is what started it. So I was having all these experiences. I could close my eyes. I could see what people were doing at a distance in detail and describe it to them on occasion. And I was having out-of-body experiences spontaneously. They weren't. One or two times I triggered it on my own. Anyway, I heard of a woman at UCLA doing research in this area. Her name was Dr. Thelma Moss. So I sent her a letter. I got no reply. I called, left the switchboard. The operator were still voicemail back then, obviously. And I said, I need to speak to you. This is what's going on. I'd like to just let's get in a discussion. Maybe you could help me better understand why these things are happening to me and not to my friends or family. She didn't respond. So I called again, and I gave up. Not long thereafter, a guy I didn't even know. He was a graduate student. I was undergraduate in college. And he heard about me and what I was doing. I did some experiments, in psychology classes in this area. So I told him about what my life's been like. And so he said, I'm going to have Dr. Moss get hold of you. I said, okay, great. So she called. She told me to come to her house. She lived in Beverly Hills, which is like 5 minutes away from where I lived at the time with my parents. And so I drove to her house, and it was a beautiful little home. I knew nothing about her other than the paranormal work she did. I knew nothing about her at all. So I sat down, and she said, can you do psychometry? I said, yeah. So she gave me her keys. And I started talking about this, and I said, I see a fat, blue-eyed blonde woman named Shelley who's screaming her head off all the time. Well, that was an accurate, albeit unflattering description of Thelma's best friend, Shelley Winters, the actress.
Wow.
And so that's how it began. And so it ended up that I became a research assistant in the lab, but early on, she was doing a study on me. It was published in a medical journal in the mid-'70s. Study of a psychic, I forgot the term. It's referenced on my website in several of my articles. So, okay, the study was done. Okay, you're telepathic, you have precognition, blah, 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 clairvoyance. Okay, but again, why? Why was this happening to me and yet not to my friends and family? And as I got older, I discovered that this is a great way to drive friends away, because they either thought you were crazy or they were terrified of you.
I can only imagine.
And, so this is how it all began. And other couple quick stories that explain. See, I'm into this field not just as a scientist seeking answers and understanding, but also as an experiencer. One time, okay, this is like late 60s, I was dating a girl who lived about 12 miles away. So I was, this was before the convenience stores everywhere like they do now. So we were going to sleep, and I found the drip of water, and I love iced tea. There was nowhere to get it, so I went to sleep. I had a dream, and in the dream, I came back to my parents' house, and I walked in the place. I drank right from the pitcher and then walked out, and that was the dream. Okay. I come home the next day. My parents said, it could have been a lot quieter last night. I go, what? And you came home? I go, what the fuck? I never came home. Yes, you did. My father, who had been he was an insomniac, always had trouble sleeping. He slept in bed with his wife, my mom. He slept in a spare bed, like when my grandmother was alive. He slept in the Barca lounger in the living room. Well, on this particular night, he was sleeping in the Barca lounger. He heard and saw me come in. He said I slammed the door, which I do not remember doing. He saw me go in the kitchen. he assumed I was guzzling tea from the pitcher, which I was the only one that did, that he saw me leave by the same method. And I was 18 miles away. So, you know, a little bit of a problem there. Another incident happened. I was dating a girl back in the late 60s. Her name was Shauna. She was William Shatner's niece. Well, she is William Shatner's niece. It wasn't. Anyway, we were. It was more like friendship. That wasn't going anywhere. So I had, in a dream, you know, I'm sleeping, and then suddenly somebody wakes me up, and there's Shauna next to my bed, standing there. And she puts her hand over my forehead. She goes, "It's only me. It's only me." And I, what? And I start to sit up against her hand in bed, and she just disappears.
Wow.
And then the phone rang shortly thereafter, and it was Shauna. And she said, "What just happened?" I said, "You tell me." She described exactly what I experienced. Okay, out of body, doppelganger. Okay. Then another incident happened with another girl, a couple of years later. I'm trying to think which was Shauna, and then I met a girl named Carol in the lab. She looked like a short, young Shirley MacLaine, very attractive. Anyway, so we're dating. Long story short, so, but there was a lot of tension because she was also dating a married man who promised to leave his wife and marry her, which of course never happened. But anyway, so there was a lot of tension because it was initially a superficial relationship. It wasn't romantic yet. So I go to sleep one night, and I'm just about falling asleep, and I feel the covers behind me go up. Oh, that's I want to.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Cell phone. I can't turn it off.
No worries. Go ahead.
Wait, it'll stop in a second. Wait, what's it? Sorry about this.
That's okay. No worries. It always happens, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I saw it's one of the scam calls that comes in.
Oh, I know. Dr. Taff, it happens to us all the time,
Yeah.
right in the middle of everything. No worries.
Okay, that's the end of that. I can turn this off now. Turn the power off. Okay. So, I was sleeping and I suddenly felt the cover, the quilts, or whatever is on top of you, go up behind me, and I feel a body roll into my body, excuse me. And it was female. It had breasts, I smelled perfume or something. I see an arm coming over me, like, what the? And I jumped up, and of course there was nothing there. So, about an hour later, the phone rings, and it's Carol. And she goes, what did you do to me? I went, what? She goes, I found myself getting in bed with you, and you moved, or put my arm around you, and you moved and scared me, and I found myself back in my own bed. I said, at least you could have stayed. And we were dated for a while, and it was okay, except two things ended it. This is part and parcel of my background and how it's been so odd compared to most other people that have lived a really normal life. So one time we were at her place, and we're talking, and I was looking at her, and my vision kicked in. And I said, oh, Carol, you got a tumor. And I showed her where on her left breast. She goes, how do you see that? What tumor? I said, there's a tumor. How do you see a tumor? I said, don't worry, it's benign. I showed her where it was, and how do you know it's benign? I said, I don't see calcium around it. She went, what? And I don't want to talk about it. Okay. So she finished her degree shortly thereafter at UCLA, and she got a job with the company, and she gave her a full medical workup for insurance purposes. And they found a lump in the left breast where I said it would be, and it was a tumor, and it was benign, and they took it out. Strike one. That was strike two with her. Strike three was she went with me to see The Exorcist opening night in 1973 in Westwood, and I already met Vladdy and Friedkin. They came to the lab. It's discussed in my book. So during the first act, we see Linda Blair being bounced around in the bed before it gets really dangerous in the story, in the movie. I turned to Carol and I said, I've seen a bed do that in a house in Hollywood some years ago. And from the front of the theater, a voice booms out, hey, is that you, Barry? Are you the only Barry Taff could say that? And people went, what? And, and Carol was embarrassed. to be a professor of mine from a medical statistics class. So anyway, that's part of what got me into this. And I was interested in two areas. I was interested, as I am now, in the laboratory work, which they did on me. And I wondered, is it possible to take normal, healthy people and train them to become more psychic, to enhance whatever inherent natural abilities they may have by using standard methods of positive feedback in mode in training? Is it possible to do that, to make it where they could utilize this on a more real level rather than it being spontaneous and random, so to speak? And the other area I was intrigued with was, of course, poltergeist, and ghosts, and hauntings, and apparitions. So, do you have any, before I get into this, any more questions before we jump into this?
So, yes, sir. Actually, so that's really interesting. It seems to me that you didn't really ask for it per se. You were living this phenomenon, and you got sucked into it. Is that accurate? Is
right.
that accurate?
I mean, curiosity. I was always curious about it, but being in the center of it, meaning that you're part of the situation. In a way, you're investigating yourself. You want to know why and how.
Right.
And we still don't know why and how. And one of the things Dr. Moss said a long time ago was the reason I developed these abilities was because I was small. I'm not a big guy. And as a kid, I was really small. And I said, well, that's intriguing. But I said, I didn't know I wouldn't grow up to be tall. How would I know that? So it doesn't make sense. I mean, it was a form of compensation for dealing with the stress of being small, short,
Yes,
so
sir.
Maybe, who knows? But again, most other parapsychologists that I've known of, didn't get into this because of their own experience. They got into it because they're curious about it in terms of science, which I am as well. Any other questions before we delve into the depth?
Yes, sir. That's kind of all I wanted. That's really interesting how you got into this. I'd like to hear a little bit about when you started working for the parapsychology lab.
Right.
Tell me about some of the experiments you did in the early years of that.
Okay. Now this is the laboratory work. So they were testing me and right, experiments. It's written up on my website. It's written in Dr. Moss's first book, The Improbability of the Impossible. I discuss it in my book as well, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below. But I was a psychic tech to Dr. Moss, and I could turn my abilities on at will, to a degree. They were all the mental type. And so, again, the curiosity was, also, growing up, if you looked at my family's album, when I was a little kid, you'd see that there weren't many photographs of me in it compared to a normal family album. And it wasn't because my parents hated me, or they were frightened of me, but they didn't hate me. They were unnerved by what was going on. And the reason that is, lack of photos, is that I've always had a problem being photographed or taking pictures. Always. And I can't make it happen. I can't stop it from happening. An example, graduating from high school, 1967, summer 1967, Fairfax High. So you got to get dressed up one day, and they come in and take your picture. And they called me, well, we had a problem with your picture, Barry. It looked like you were in a cloud. They showed me, it looked like you couldn't see me at all. There was this cloud around me. Okay, here we go again. So I had to go back and get in, wear the same suit and tie the whole day. I did it again. Oh, the same thing. We took 9 photos, and they were all blurred. And you have this problem often? I go, yeah. It's why I never really got into photography. I was intrigued by it, but I didn't want to waste my money and time. So after the third try, they finally got one photo they could use that went in the yearbook. Okay. In pictures of growing up, my family, you see me, but like one picture in the backyard from 1964, it's color, and you see colored balls of light zipping around me that were not visible to the naked eye.
I've seen that.
And yeah, so there's that. And then the picture that I took of my parents about, I don't know, 20 years ago, I guess. Yeah, 20 years ago, with a camera my parents had. I forgot, a little small camera. And in every frame that I took, there were luminous anomalies. In other frames taken by them, there weren't. One of the pictures, they're in the dining room, and I'm taking it, and it looks like you've got huge floodlights of different colors coming in from the right and the top, and the entire frame is distorted in some weird way, and yet every other frame that I didn't take was perfect. But this is an ongoing problem. And then the time it was the best was in 1978. Yeah, it was 78. Yeah, around there. I was called with my colleague at the time to go to do. They wanted us to do a talk show. It was shot at Television City at Fairfax, the southeast corner of Fairfax and Beverly Drive. So we go there. We've already done other shows, so no big deal. So they're interviewing us and the production assistants, and it's same old, same old. But then they want to take our pictures. So we stand up, and my colleague Carrie Gaynor was to my right, maybe by a foot or two. And Carrie, before the production assistant took our picture with an SX70 Polaroid, Carrie said, "Oh, Barry doesn't show up in photos." And I went, "Yeah, he's a vampire." And he went, "You'll see." And I said to him, "Why did you say that? When it looked like we're crazy. Why are you doing this?" So he had a big grin on his face. Little did we know how prescient his words were. Fitch takes the picture. It pops out of the camera. It develops. Girl looks at the picture. She looks at it. She goes, "Look." Well, Carrie showed up really well. Clear, looked great. All you saw where I was a mass of light. No face, no head, no hair, no body.
Wow.
So what does it mean? If there was a normal flash that was strong enough to obliterate me and put light in its place, it should have also bled off on the area that Carrie was in, since he was a foot or two to my right. But it didn't. These problems I've had all my life, and I don't know what they are. Now, so Dr. Moss was intrigued by this. She was caught up in the Curlian photography stuff, which was intriguing from a visual perspective, but it had no paranormal relevance, more so than an EEG would or a EKG would. Anyway, so she used a lot of sheet film for the Curlian photography. So it comes in a heavy cardboard box, and it's wrapped in metal foil to keep heat from it and whatever. So she had me hold the box for just like a minute, and she developed the film. And guess what? The film was exposed.
Okay.
She had other people hold other boxes, including herself. Same as I did, developed them. They weren't exposed. They were black. There was no light that hit them. So what was I doing that made them to become exposed? Now I'll jump forward to about like 2005. I met a doctor, to a friend of mine, who's a physician in Beverly Hills. Forgot his name, and I was telling him about this. So he said, I told him about my ability to look through people and objects. And he went, "Okay." So I demonstrated it to him, and he said, "Here, I'm going to do something. I'm going to put an unexposed X-ray film in front of your face. I'll mark your brow ridge. I'll mark your chin, and so we'll know where your eyes were. And look through it like you were looking through a person." Okay, fine. So I did it. He develops the film. He goes, "Look." And I went, "Well, look, oh my." Right where my eyes were, there was evidence of radiation coming out of it in the X-band. What? So, I don't know. I mean, this is normal to me. So I wanted to know, why me? Why not others? Well, we started what's called a psi development program. I did, which is done in the lab at UCLA. Now, to read about this in some depth, you can visit my website, www.barrytaff.net. There's an article called Learned Psi, Training to be Psychic. Learned Psi, training to be psychic, and it goes into depth of what we did. I'll explain it since we're live here. We had a room that was almost sensory deprivation, pitch black, and what we had, I developed a learning paradigm for this process, meaning that if you're given positive feedback, the one you're getting accurate impressions mentally, theoretically, some people should improve their ability to differentiate between the paranormal information and fantasy or, confabulation in someone's own mind. So we'd have a room pitch black, and we gave people a target. Let's say you came there. We didn't know who you were. You gave us the name of your wife. We didn't know who we didn't know it was your wife. And then we would verbalize our impressions to a microphone. Does it all be recorded? You wouldn't say a word. Then that lasted maybe 10 minutes. Then we stopped, turned the lights on. We run the tape back, and we have you take the control. And when you heard a statement that was accurate about your wife or yourself, you would stop the tape and comment. If it wasn't accurate, you wouldn't stop. So we were getting positive feedback and reinforcement. And it worked really well. So well that Dr. Moss, unbeknownst to me, had members of different groups that come to our group in disguise, Office of Naval Intelligence, CIA, NSA, DIA, all these groups. And, we did it. They were very impressed. Okay. And bottom line, before I get into some more depth, is they wanted to work with us. And we might have been the focal point of the remote viewing research as opposed to it going up to Stanford Research Institute, because they were very interested in what we were doing. And I could understand that. It made sense. But UCLA did not want to become embroiled in the paranormal. They already had enough problems with psychosurgery and orbital undercutting and other things they were doing. And they didn't need to be linked to something as potentially disruptive as the paranormal. It was as politically incorrect then as it is now in academia. So we did this stuff. Like our one instance, we didn't know who the people were. I remember we were rattling off information for something called a Trident submarine, but it didn't exist yet, as far as we knew, and in great depth, and the B-2 missile and the whole bit. And they were so upset, or I guess worried over what we had told them. Because how could we know? No, we didn't even know who they were. They demanded that we surrendered the audio tape, which we did.
Under threats, or is it you
no,
do it or go?
I could understand their concern. We were rattling off what was then classified information.
Oh, okay.
There was no Trident sub. They had the old Polaris subs back then. Anyway,
yeah. My dad was in the Navy actually in the late '60s and early '70s during the Cold War, end of Vietnam era, and most of the missions he went on, he is classified still to this day. So I can definitely understand where they were coming from.
Yeah. So it was, we had some amazing experiences in this group. And what came out of it is that we learned something that we never thought we'd experience as a group. What I learned, others stayed with us. ESP, or sometimes called remote viewing. Remote viewing is a new nomenclature that describes being able to perceive information remote from the human body. So that would be telepathy, that would be clairvoyant, precognition. Telepathy is mind-to-mind communication. Clairvoyance is the ability to perceive events at a distance independent of another mind for giving you the data. And then precognition is the ability to see the future before it occurs. And there's retrocognition, which is the ability to see the past without logic or inference or knowledge. And the way we define such information when it's perceived is how it's relative to where you are in space and time when you perceive it. So if it comes from the future, it's precognition. It comes from the past, it's retrocognition. It comes from mind, it's telepathic. It comes from a distance, it's clairvoyant. It's all the same thing. We're remotely accessing information.
So basically,
And
you would be.
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I apologize
No,
for. I
go
didn't mean
ahead.
to
Go
cut.
ahead. Go ahead.
So basically, what you're saying, Dr. Taff, is instead of gathering, getting access to another biological, a person's mind, you're basically uh, gathering data from what I would like to call the cosmic hard drive. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, I would. Well, after all this work, let me give a few more incidences, then it'll pin this down a little better. Like one instance, the girl came to the group. I knew her because she was another volunteer in the lab. She was kind of spacey and out there, and just the only thing I knew that she did on a frequent basis was drugs. So I didn't want her to come, but Dr. Moss demanded. Okay, so she came. We didn't know anything about her other than her name. She gave us the target. Go through our thing. We described the house, beautiful, the large glass walls, and remember the huge kitchen lined with empty jars of bacon bits. I'll never forget this. It was so vivid to me. And then the foliage, lush foliage around it, and we just threw out a name, different phonetic variations on a name. I can't use it for privacy concerns. And okay. And then we started, and then get the woman, the girl is not responding. We're making these statements in a sensory-deprived environment. You can't see, you can't hear, you can't feel. You're just in a pitch-black environment. And so the feedback period comes. Oh, no, wait. The last thing we said before we stopped the session was that this man was being viciously beaten and mugged really bad.
Goodness.
So the feedback period comes. The girl was going through it. Yeah, a description of the environment, the house is accurate. The kitchen was lined with empty jars of bacon bits. And, okay. The phonetic variations on his name were accurate, if not, they were distorted, but they were still somewhat accurate. An odd name. And, of course, she said, he's never been beaten or mugged. What are you talking about? Okay, well, okay. The next day, we're in the lab. I'm in the lab, and this girl calls. She goes, remember what we did the session yesterday? Yeah. Remember what you said about my friend being beaten and mugged? Yeah, well, I didn't know it, but at the very moment that we were doing the groups, he was being viciously beaten and mugged up in San Francisco.
Good God.
So what's the source? It's not from this girl. It's from the man. No, it's accessing remote information.
So if what you're saying is true, then if that let's say that is a scientific fact and it's proven at some point, in which I suspect it may be, then that would indicate that predestination.
Well, we're coming to that. This is where it gets real dicey, and this is where people get upset, and I can understand it. Let me give you another example.
Thank you.
This is in my book, but it's worth discussing because even when I discuss it now, it gives me goosebumps. So it was the late 70s, and we got tired of doing the real time stuff because in the groups because it was easy to do, relatively speaking. And one time, sensory deprivation, describe the randomly chosen target from the first session of next week. Okay, it's a week later, okay? So we're describing a beautiful blue-eyed blonde girl, statuesque model type, wearing a beige pants outfit, dark beige pants outfit, dress, beautiful. And in that room, there were 24 chairs. Each had a number beneath them, which you could not see unless you flipped the chair over. We just named the chair she sat in. We saw a 3-story home in the Hollywood Hills. We saw a big baby grand piano. And then we start describing a tall man, well over 6 feet, maybe 6'4", 6'5", wearing a black shirt, black pants, black boots, black gloves, black hat, black mask, a black cape, and an imposing sword.
Interesting.
And okay, so this is, and we thought we were losing our mind. Okay, so a week goes by, and people come to this first session of the next week, and each new person is given a sealed envelope, opaque, and inside there is a piece of paper with a number on it. It's 1 to 12. Okay, so people I'm in. They choose whatever seat they want, except my seat because I have the control of the microphone, recording mechanism. And okay, so I roll dice, and roll dice stop. Everyone sees. Okay, those of you that have the packets, open them. New people that have never been there before and didn't know our procedures. Okay, the girl says, "Oh, that number is mine." So when I told her, "Take this control, you're going to play the tape, and if you hear anything relevant to you, stop the tape and comment." Now, we forgot what we said a week earlier. Who remembers stuff?
Right.
So the tape's playing, and she hears a perfect description of her face, her hair, her height, her body, even her clothes. On her own free will, she had sat in the one chair we named out of 24. Actually, 23, because I had one chair I used it for my own. And then, what? And then we described the house. That's the house she grew up in. 3-star home in Hollywood Hills. They had a baby grand piano. Could have still been coincidence. Good luck. Coincidence. And then we described the tall man dressed in black with the sword, the mask. And she turns to me, this woman, this girl, says, "How do you know who I am?" And I went, "What? How do you know who I am?" I go, "Who are you?" "I'm Tony Williams," she said. I go, "Who?" Tony, what? My father is Guy Williams. He played Zorro for Disney.
You don't say. Wow.
Yeah, even now, as I'm repeating this for the umpteenth time, it gives me goosebumps because this is amazing.
It is
And
amazing.
she said, "When did you make the tape?" "A week ago." "A week ago? I didn't know it was coming until a few hours ago, and I was randomly chosen." I go, "Yeah, that's right. But then how can you, exactly, how can you see something that hasn't occurred yet? Unless the information of it is already there."
That's fascinating.
Made her a little uneasy and made some of our regulars, participants of the group, a little uneasy. I could understand it. It
Sure.
fascinated me. So this was intriguing. So sometime later, a couple months later, we try to do another precognitive remote viewing session. Okay, pitch black, describe the first thing. So we all keep seeing fire, fire, fire. What fire? We thought we were losing our mind. The next day I'm up in the lab, and fire engines are coming to the Neuropsychiatric Institute where the lab was. The room we were using caught fire. An outlet behind one of the drapes, the curtains in the room, had sparked. It shorted. It sparked and caught the drapes on fire. And the reason that we perceived fire because it was the most imminent.
Interesting.
It's amazing. It's mind-boggling. The whole thing.
It is.
This is where this group, and we did thousands of these sessions. Even when the lab ended, we did them in offices in Westwood, then in the person's homes. We had thousands of these sessions. And my belief is that, okay, it's real simple. Information that makes up space and time is equally distributed in space and time. If you get, for example, if you have a photograph, an 8x10 glossy of someone, let's say a model or an actor, and you cut it in little pieces, each piece is a little piece of the whole, but you can't see more than the little piece. Take a hologram and you cut it, each piece can recreate the whole image because the information in the hologram is equally distributed. And there's strong evidence suggesting that parts of our brain function at this level, in a holographic or holonomic fashion. And my belief is that space-time regarding the paranormal is the same, meaning that the past information still exists. The future's information already exists. And the ability to perceive something in Timbuktu or China or Russia or Antarctica or the moon is equally possible because all information is equally distributed throughout space and time.
Precognitive predestination in a
right,
sense.
But then comes, wait a minute, that would suggest that the free will is an illusion. Yeah, it would. There was an episode, I reference this in my book and then on my website. there was an episode of The Twilight Zone where the actor Russell Johnson goes back in time, not knowing he was going to do it, and he tries to prevent the assassination of Lincoln. And he can't do that, and he freaks everyone out by telling them. But at the end, he did change a couple things, which altered the future when he came back to the present. And at the end, the closing monologue by Rod Serling, the skein of events is woven very tightly, but there are some things that can be changed. That's it. That we don't know. How much control is there? Is this all an illusion? Meaning, are we living a reality where there's evidence now, as astrophysicists suggesting, that the past and the future are the same. The first step in this direction, that space-time is holonomic or holographic.
That's just so mind-blowing to me. Absolutely mind-blowing.
It's sort of like, it's, let me give a story. I met a girl in undergraduate school. This is before I entered graduate school. She was named Sharon, gorgeous blue-eyed blonde. She looked like an actress. I can't remember the name of now. It doesn't matter. So we're dating, and it's fine. She lived in Northridge. So I had a really cool car at the time. The distance was irrelevant. There wasn't a lot of traffic. Gas was cheap. We're dating. So then came the dreams. And this is where my brain always warns me of the shape of things to come, if it threatens me. So in the dream, it's recurring, always the same dream. I see her in the passenger seat. I see someone with dark hair on the steering wheel, but I can't see the person's face or the man's face. We turn down the cul-de-sac to get to her house, and a much larger car comes flying out and hits us. Really, it T-bones us, and there's glass and fire and the whole bit. And Sharon's broken and bloody, and it's horrible. And the dream kept occurring. So I said, well, this isn't good. So I finally told Sharon about this. She goes, you were just making this up so you won't have to keep dating me because I live so far away from you. I go, hey, gas is 25 cents a gallon. Who cares? I had a Z28 Camaro that was great, and, I actually had a Corvette for a while before I turned it into a race car.
That's cool.
The whole point is, distant gas was irrelevant, but I wasn't going to risk our lives for a relationship. What's the point? If we're dead, it doesn't make any difference. So I figured, well, I stopped seeing her. She was angry. I was worried that maybe I did the best to change the future, but I really liked Sharon. So we stopped dating. And sometime later, she started dating someone else. And, the actress that she resembled is Jane Krakowski, big blue-eyed blonde.
What movie was she in?
Sharon looked exactly like her, but, younger.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she started dating someone else. And guess what happens? Exactly what I thought transpired. She's in his car, turning down the cul-de-sac where she lived, the house where she lived, and a car comes out and hits him, and he was killed instantly, the driver, and she was badly injured, and she's been pretty messed up most of her life because of it. So did my knowledge of that prevent me from being killed as opposed to her new boyfriend, or was that the way it was always supposed to happen?
That's the big question right there. Is it predestination, or are we somewhat in control of our destiny?
Right. There's so many stories. I remember when we were teaching parapsychology at UCLA in Extension, 1974, 75, 76. So in 1975, a beautiful blue-eyed blonde girl comes up. Remember me? I go, no. She says, my father's your physician. I go, but the general practice. I go, I don't know he had a daughter. We knew each other in grammar school. I don't remember, a long time ago. So we started dating. Everything was great. Except that we were together, things started happening. And one time we're watching TV in her house, and a can of Pepsi goes flying across the room. And yet no one there to throw it. We were pulling up to her garage. It was raining, and I thought I'd get out to open the door because the remote in the car wasn't working. And so I touched her, so I'll be back in a second, and there was a spark between us. Yet it was raining, but there was a spark between us, and suddenly the door opened on its own. But we drove in. One time we're in bed together, and the stereo comes on, and records play, but the stereo wasn't on, and that record was not on it. Then I said, I had a dream, and I said, well, I saw you swimming underwater down to your father, who was floating lifelessly underwater, and you were giving a mouth-to-mouth underwater. And she went, what? I go, I knew what it suggested. I didn't want to tell her, because I said, oh, it's fantasy, don't worry about it. So a few weeks later, she's at her parents' house in Beverly Hills, and it's sunny, and they're up by the pool, and he collapses and dies of a pulmonary embolism. And he died of drowning on his own bodily fluid. And she did give him mouth-to-mouth. So what I saw was accurate, albeit somewhat distorted. It still begs the question, and that upset her, and that ended the relationship. The lab, we knew we were on borrowed time all the time we were there. And we knew it was just a matter of time before the powers that be decided we should leave. But I had a dream, I think it was like 1977 or 8, and in the dream we're all in the lab, Dr. Moss, myself, my colleague, other people that worked there, and Dr. Julian West, who was the head of the Neuropsychiatric Institute, he comes in, and this is in my book on my website. He started going on ranting about how much he hated us, what we're doing, we're defaming the institution, we have to leave. Suddenly, the room starts to shake like from a violent earthquake. We're back and forth and up and down. Oh my God. And we were on the 5th floor, so that could fall and die with no problem. And shaking, and then the room stops moving. What? Huh? And we're moving laterally or horizontally now. And we look out of the window, and instead of looking out into the sky towards the west, we see there's a wooden plank there, and there's looks like some type of a corpse there, and whipping horses, and there's a corpse of a dog next to her, of a German Shepherd. What? And suddenly Dr. West goes, oh my God, what? That's my sister. No, my sister.
Gosh,
what?
dog.
Well, but she died years ago of cancer. She wasted away. I went, what? And that's her dog. And he was mauled in an auto accident long before she passed away. What? This is the dream still. Okay. And then we stop. I open the door to the hallway, and we step out. No more hallway. Pitch black. It's all black, moist earth. Some of a Roger Corman horror film. There's fog on the ground. We step down these little steps, and the room is turned into a funeral coach from the 18th century or 19th century. At each corner there's a glass thing with a candle in it, and there is the corpse. And I go, what is this? And the corpse of the woman goes, I brought you here to bury you because you're dead. And I jumped up in bed, my heart was pounding, I was dripping perspiration. It was pretty scary. And so, oh God, sorry. Made some notes. Pretty scary. It's frightening, I'll tell you.
I bet.
So I told Dr. Moss about it. She goes, well, it was just a dream. It's a little paranoia dream, whatever. Well, whatever. Okay. A few weeks later, Dr. Julian West comes in and reads us the riot act, as my dreams demonstrated, and tells us he's shutting us down. Okay?
Oh, my goodness.
And, well, we knew it would happen. We didn't know the exact date. It's a question of when. So as he leaves, I walk out with him. Dr. West, can I speak to you? What do you want? Okay. You have a sister? He goes, what? Do you have a sister? Well, I did. What do you mean you did? Oh, she died. How did she die? She was wasted away, cancer, wasted away to nothingness. Okay. Did she have a dog? What? A dog? Yeah. What are you asking me? What kind of dog? A German Shepherd. What happened to the dog? He was killed in an auto accident. He was torn apart, years before she died. with his sister. I go, thank you. What? What are you talking about? Forget it. He looks, what? So it's interesting. My dream had primary process. It interpreted the death of the lab as the death of us. We did not die in an earthquake, or we were not about to be buried at this, by this corpse with the moist earth around everywhere. I brought you here to bury you. And then in the midst of it was reality. Dr. West's sister, dog, and the lab shut down. So it's sort of like the mind mixing enough fantasy or distortion inward to make it a horror movie rather than the blanket fact that we're going to be shut down. We're going to be shuttered. That was pretty amazing. That was okay. Another evidence.
Sure. Let's hear this evidence. I want to hear this next story, and after that, we'll take a short break.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. Trying to think which one was it. Oh, I was dating this girl named Darlene, and everything was going really well. And in the dream one night, I'm in the cockpit of a 747 airliner, TWA, and we're flying towards South Africa. Don't ask me how I knew that. You can't tell that from the altitude you fly at. You can't see continental divide like you do from space. So the dream was
yes, sir.
And suddenly the turbofans go away. All the turbofans disappear. And we're falling like a lead balloon. And we hit and explode. And I fly to bed, sweating terribly. And I went down and what happened? I just crashed the 747 going to South Africa. He goes, what? Okay, we go back to sleep. I wake up, and then I did some research. The 747 just came into service about a year or so earlier.
And what year was this approximately, just for the viewers, just for the listeners, a point of reference? What year did this transpire, just for the listeners' point of reference?
Right, this way. This was the early 70s.
Okay, thank you.
And so 747 had a perfect record. Came into service earlier. And, a couple of weeks went by, and I forgot about it. And then the first 747 goes down, and it's approaching South Africa. It was the TWA. So if that happened today, would I call the FAA?
Probably get arrested.
Think it was a bomb threat. They would think I'm a terrorist. What would you do? You don't know the day, the flight number, the time. All I know is TWA. That's all I knew, and it was a 747. So, again, why are we perceiving things that we can't intervene with? A little unnerving, maybe.
I can only imagine, Dr. Taff. I think we can take a short break here, but when we come back, I want to look into. I'd like to ask you about Chapter 3 in your book regarding the Jackie Hernandez Poltergeist case, and also we'd like to get your take on the UFO connection to parapsychological research and anything else you want to talk about. This is Profiling the Paranormal with Dr. Barry Taff, and we'll be right back. Barry Taff Part 2. That was a really amazing explanation of precognition and telepathy and other forms of mental psychic phenomenon. But there's also another side of parapsychology that's absolutely fascinating, and that's telekinesis. And I think one of your most groundbreaking cases was the Jackie Hernandez Poltergeist case. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. Now let me explain things to people so they understand where I'm coming from, what I've been doing. I've investigated thousands of cases over the last 51 years. The majority of them, you go out, you interview the people. I fill out a lengthy form for each individual, going into great detail about their background, their social life, about their health, medical history, their medication history, if they're using recreational drugs, their history, their neurological history, if any, psychodynamics of the family. And in science, you like to conduct controlled experiments, but with this phenomenon, you can't. You can't generally bring it into the lab and say, do your thing. You're out in the real world, out in the field. So you must collect a lot of data over a long period of time, hoping that you find longitudinal patterns that appeared in the data over a long period of time. And I've done that. And everything I expected to learn in the field, I didn't. Everything I would have never anticipated, I did. And what it could preface what the cases I'll discuss by this. I talk about certain people, I describe them as being biological operational amplifiers. Their bodies emit much stronger magnetic fields than normal people. In fact, there are no handheld instruments that I'm aware of that can measure a biological magnetic field. They're too weak. You need a superconducting sensor. There's no portable versions of that yet. But in poltergeist agents, we can measure their magnetic field because it's putting out hundreds of thousands or millions of times the amplitude of a normal person. Now, this is what's interesting. Of a metaphor. Let's say you got a DVD in your hand and you want to watch it. What do you need? Well, you need a DVD player, you need a television. They've got to be connected. Both have to be plugged in the wall. You then put your DVD in it, and it plays. If any part of an ensemble is missing, you don't see the images on your TV. The analogy is simple. What we need, you need very special locations that are either either geomagnetically active or just electromagnetically anomalous. You need individuals that are hypersensitive to weak electromagnetic fields. You need also people who are either seizure-prone or epileptic. And then you need people who have problems coping with stress. If all those variables meet in the right way, it produces something called inductive resonance coupling, meaning the magnetic energy in the environment couples with these unique individuals and produces this extraordinary series of events, what we call recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis or poltergeist activity. Our old world belief in this was that poltergeists were noisy ghosts. Evidence indicates otherwise. Evidence indicates that the majority of the phenomena, I'd say 98%, is an extension of living human psyches, not dead people. But there is evidence, there's something beyond that that might suggest the possibility of survival of corporeal death. And with that, let's get into the Jackie Hernandez case. Jackie Hernandez case was extraordinary for many reasons. The first of which was, at the time, I had an incredible colleague by the name of Barry Conrad. He's a professional cameraman. He's a producer, director. The guy's very gifted in terms of his professional work in the industry of the entertainment, doing work for other people. Made a good living, and we worked together for many years. And because of his involvement in the San Pedro case, which began in the summer of 1989, a woman called me, can't remember, Susan was her name, and she described her friend Jackie as having extraordinary haunting stuff going on. So Barry Conrad, Jeffrey Kraft, myself, and a few other people went out to visit Jackie Hernandez on 11th Street in San Pedro in August. Forgot the exact date. I don't have my case in front of me, boxed up in the garage somewhere. Went out there, really hot, really humid. So we entered the house, and it reeked of decomposing organic matter, the same as the entity case did. It smelled like urine everywhere, even though there wasn't anything we could find. Jackie was in a terrible place. She had two very young children, estranged from her husband, and all this stuff started. She told us of seeing an elderly apparition going around and lights and things like that, and we're interviewing her. And to be honest with you, my first impression was that I thought Jackie was a druggie, that she was doing drugs and whatever. Turned out that was wrong. She was very volatile, very frenetic, but she wasn't using drugs as far as we could determine. However, we were there, and the first night, so we're in the kitchen, and above us is the attic. And it sounded like there was a 20-pound, 30-pound pig bouncing around the attic, or a sloth or something. Bang, boom, boom. So our gear kept turning off, our cameras kept turning off for some reason. We go up in the attic, and it's just a normal attic there. We don't see anything there. So Jeff Wheatcraft was up there with another one of our friends named Gary Bain, another friend of Barry's. We needed his assistance with certain gear we had. They're up in the attic. and they're about to come down this little crawl space which goes into the laundry room. And Jackie and Barry and myself and others are downstairs. We hear them walking, and suddenly we hear ah, like, and we what? And Gary turns around and fires the camera. It's so dark he couldn't see. The flashlight had stopped, and he sees Jeff. There's something wrapped around Jeff Wheatcraft's neck, and it's pulling him up, hanging him over one of the rafter bolts. And Gary rushed to Jeff's aid, and had Gary not been in the attic, Jeff would have died. Something had wrapped the clothesline around Jeff's neck, was trying to hang him. Now, this is interesting because obviously there was no person up there doing it. So we didn't see it. No one saw anything up there. Barry went up, Conrad went up there later, didn't see anything.
So he was up there by himself? He was up there completely by himself, correct?
No, Gary Bain. They were just about to come down.
Oh, okay.
Gary Bain was in front of him, and Barry Bain heard Jeff with the, turned around and he saw that was the clothesline wrapped around his neck in a bowling knot.
Yeah, I saw that video, actually.
Bain, yeah, and Barry Conrad produced incredible two things about the case. A video called An Unknown Encounter. If you can find it, get it, because it's fascinating. He wrote a book called An Unknown Encounter about the haunting of Jackie Hernandez. It's an incredible book, incredible video. Barry did an extraordinary job all on his own. I mean, it's just amazing. And what's really more amazing with this case, this case didn't end there. More stuff. We were back at the house a few times, and but eventually, Jackie had to leave. She had moved to Weldon, which is northern California, a couple hundred miles north of Los Angeles. At the time, I couldn't help Jeff and Barry because my father had a heart attack and I had to be around my mom to help her. So I was out of the case for a while. But they're up there in Weldon, and televisions turn on, but they're not plugged in. Sofas are bouncing around. They're having a little seance there, and Jeff is picked up by an unseen force and thrown up, hits the wall, and then falls back to the floor. They thought he was dead. But there was nothing physical there that did it. Now, this is where it gets real complicated because Jeff was 6'2", about 190, 200 pounds, and the energy it takes to move a 200-pound mass is considerable. The energies we know of in the universe, there are only four: electromagnetism, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, and gravity. That's it, for the most part. And before they do work, if they do work like moving a 200-pound man, there's a byproduct that's called heat. It's the first law of thermodynamics. Well, before a human body of 200 pounds mass can be moved, the heat liberated by such a thing during such an event would cause his clothing and most things in the room to combust in flames. Yet, if anything, the environments get colder during and before this transpires. This suggests a form of energy that is endothermic.
That totally boggles my mind.
Yeah, all the energy we know of in the world are, for the most part, are exothermic. They emit heat when they do work. An energy source that does work without heat could be the biggest single change in technology since the wheel. Because everything would change completely. It would be unlike anything we've known of. So, anyway, get on with this case. Jeff's out of it. When he came out of in Barry's video, when he came out of the laundry, you could see this burn mark in his neck. And I said it would have taken much more time for his neck to be broken or to be suffocated. And Jeff walked away from the case for a while. The case evolved. Jackie moved up to Weldon. They followed her up there months later. And I wasn't available. And then she came back down to San Pedro. Now, this is what gets even stranger. The phenomenon stayed with Jackie. The phenomenon was still happening around her, but at a lower ebb. It ebbed slightly. It somewhat waned. But meanwhile, in the original house or bungalow on 11th Street in San Pedro, phenomena was still occurring there with new tenants who had no prior knowledge of the case or never heard of Jackie Hernandez. So, wait a minute. So it starts off on 11th Street. She leaves 11th Street. The phenomena goes with her, but phenomena still say it's 11th Street. They go, wait, what? Wait a minute. And this is where it gets really strange. In medicine, let's say you want to go visit your friend's house, and you know that their kids are sick, but you've got to go there and talk to your friend and pick some paperwork up or something like that. So you go there, you're careful, you don't touch anything, hello, blah, 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 you talk, you don't get near the kids are in their bedroom, you leave, okay, you get home, you get sick, you give it to your wife, and then she gives it to your kids. We know what that's a vector pathogen, we know what that is. There may be something equivalent to that going on in the paranormal, but it's not biological. It's what I call a psychovirus. It does the same thing as pathogens, perhaps, but it does so regarding an energy type we don't yet understand. And this is where it gets even stranger. Now, Jeff, throughout the case, was also attacked. Now, Jackie came back and stayed with Barry Conrad for a while in his apartment in Studio City years ago, and nothing would happen when they were there. She leaves because another girl came staying with Barry, so she had to leave. She was upset. Phenomena then breaks out in Barry's apartment after she leaves.
After she's gone.
And the stove turned on, windows broke. It's amazing. It's all in the video. I couldn't do it justice by describing it, but this video is enough to curl your hair if it's straight. Barry did an exceptional job, Barry Conrad, of documenting it, capturing all the little nuances and aspects of the case. But what's interesting, Jeff, in Barry's apartment years ago, something pushed him so hard, it took a carving into his back, the scar in his back, and it's in the video. Barry's sleeping one time during the period, and suddenly scissors go flying right through the pillow right next to Barry's head.
Wow.
Things like that. Things he threw in the garbage he found back in the house. Phenomena came and went. Now, what's interesting is that I adopted the belief that the reason the phenomenon kept attacking Jeff, it attacked like 4 different times, is because Jackie disliked Jeff. Well, that was true. Jackie was very attracted to Barry Conrad, as most girls were, or are. Tall guy, dark hair, blue eyes, and girls loved him. And so she was attracted to Barry, but an impediment to that potential binding was Jeff Wheatcraft, who was always around Barry when they were there. So she didn't like Jeff. And I said to her on one show, what do you think of Jeff? I don't like him. Why? Well, he's in the way of me and Barry. And who does the phenomena keep attacking? Jeff.
Wow, that's fascinating.
On the show I was on, I said, we're seeing the psychokinetic manifestation of Jackie, PK, attacking Jeff to get him out of the way. To remove him, make him leave. And it's amazing. I talked about this on a show, I forgot which one it was, Hard Copy or one of those, I don't remember. And the producer said, so Jackie's telling the ghosts what to do, and the ghosts is attacking Jeff? No, it's Jackie's unconscious mind that's doing this. What? Huh? So it didn't affect the story really well. But the whole point of it is we're learning things from this, that this stuff is far more complicated than we ever imagined. And, there's Barry's book and video, you spend a lot of time reading and watching it, and you will not be bored. Barry did an exceptional job. And I'm not saying it because he is a friend of mine and working with me. I'm saying it because he knows how to produce the video and write. It took him a long time to do it because he was working at the same time for other people. But the case was extraordinary. And I'd be willing to bet that if we had run medical workups on Jackie, that she was seizure prone. I'd be willing to bet it. But a long time ago, we can't do it. The phenomena stopped around her a long time ago. She matured. The phenomena just stopped happening. Now, let's take another case of equal significance, and that is the case of the entity. 1974 went out first date August 22nd, 1974, in Culver City, California, on Braddock Drive, and we go out what happened, my colleague was in as the movie depicted, was in a bookstore in Westwood that no longer exists, and talking about our work with his friend. And there were two women in the next aisle, and they overheard him. The woman said to my colleague, Carrie Gaynor, "Oh, my house is haunted." So Carrie got her name and her phone number. And we talked to her, went out to see her August 22nd. And the very first thing, we entered the house, it stinks of decomposing organic matter and urine. Terrible odor. It wasn't very pleasant.
Same.
And the very first thing she told us was she'd been repeatedly raped by a ghost.
My goodness.
We rolled our eyes back. If the woman needs psychiatric intervention, she doesn't need a parapsychologist. So she talked with us and described things. We said, "Look, there's really nothing we can do for you because we're not psychiatrists. We suggest here's some references to call at UCLA, but there's nothing we can do." So that was 10 days later. She called back. Some neighbors and friends had witnessed us. We go back again at night. The house had that same stench. We're in the kitchen talking with her, and suddenly the lower cupboard swings open, and a skillet goes flying out several feet away and hits the floor. So we checked to see if there were wires or springs or animals or a child inside. Nope, no, nothing. But Jackie had 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. We never met the youngest one, which was the girl. And the phenomena was pretty intense. It was really hard interviewing. I'm blanking out on her name now. Doris Piper. She was very cryptic and evasive. She wouldn't even give us her age. Well, I knew she was older than me. I didn't know by how much. But there's a sleaziness to her. I can't make it any clearer than that. Just bad presence. And the house stunk. So we listened. We saw the things happening. It evolved to the point where we started seeing strange lights roaming around her house. So to make sure these weren't coming from outside the house, we sealed off parts of the house from all external lighting. And even in these conditions, we were seeing these lime green balls of light, what I called corpuscular masses. And we were able to get one of them. It's in my book and on my website. We got one of them. It looks like a comet with a tail on it. That was one. We used black and white film pushed to a very high ASA Tri-X film because that was the time was the most sensitive. This is before there were video cameras everywhere, and the ones that were available were not sensitive in low light conditions.
I want to stop you there for 1 second, if you don't mind,
Sure.
Dr. Taff. I got your book open, and I'm looking at the photograph of that. I believe it's the same thing you're talking about. And
Right.
Doris is sitting there. She's kind of holding her face, and there's like a million people in there. And I see and I just want to describe this to our listeners. There's an arc, like of light. Yeah.
Right. This is interesting. We saw lights flying all over the place. We had 4 professional photographers there that were assisting us, and we never saw that. What it appears to be is a time lapse of a ball of light arcing over Doris. And what's most significant about this picture that Carrie pointed out early on, if you look behind the arc, 2 walls meet at a 90-degree angle. If this light was a projected source, it was fraudulent, the light would be bent in accordance with the wall. The light is not bent, it's in free space. It's arcing in free space. You never saw it. So what did we capture? We had higher speed cameras, street cameras perhaps, but you never saw. And then in other photos, you see there's another shot of when Doris is not even in the room, in the frame, and you see there's 2 arcs. One goes top to top, the other goes bottom to bottom, and they cross each other like in a 90-degree angle. Now, we gave the negatives of our photos to the West Coast editor of Popular Photography back then, a man named Adrian Vance. He analyzed them and the cameras, and he said, I can't even begin to guess what caused this. SLR cameras should not have produced images like this. Of course, but what produced the light. And this is what's interesting, where the phenomena got worse, where we put up black poster boards. We got photos, but we couldn't tell where the light was coming from or going to because there was no reference. So we covered the walls and ceiling with black poster board with duct tape, forming like a checkerboard. Each thing had a number and a magnetic orientation on it. So at one point we're there and lights were firing and firing, and we said, and someone, I think Carrie Gaynor said, do something, come on, show yourself. And Doris was verbally attacking whatever was there, taunting it. And suddenly one of the duct tape is basically being ripped off the wall. A poster board flies through the air and hits Doris in the head.
Wow.
There's 20 people in the room. 20 people in a little bedroom. Hot as hell. The board leaves the wall of the ceiling of its own accord, flies across it, and hits Doris in the head. Little odd, I think. And, what's interesting also is that we know now, but we didn't know then, that long before Doris moved to Culver City, she lived in Santa Monica, there was phenomena happening. Not at the magnitude it was in Culver City, but it was still happening. Doris had come from a really bad, she was abused and verbally and physically. She was such a difficult child to deal with. The family disowned her long ago.
That's sad.
And each child was from a different man. Now, this is where it gets really important from a psychosexual perspective.
Okay.
Doris claimed that there were entities that attacked her. These two smaller ones would hold her down, while the big one raped her.
Okay.
She had 3 male children, 2 younger, smaller ones, 1 bigger, older one. And there was a strange psychosexual dynamic between her and her kids. The word Oedipal is very relevant here. We might have been witnessing the psychosexual manifestations of Doris' libido amplified by psychokinesis. A lot of words to swallow, but it was real and it was paranormal, but it was the externalization of her subconscious that we were witnessing. Now, it's important. Finally, we spent 10 weeks dealing with Doris. She finally moved from Culver City to Carson. We lost track of her. The man who wrote the novel and the script, the entity, Frank DiFolita, he tracked her down.
Yes, I've seen that
one.
one.
He was interviewing her. And so she moved to Carson, and phenomena followed her there. And what was interesting, her neighbors who knew nothing about her background, within a few weeks after her moving in, they began having phenomena in their homes.
No, this is the neighbor. You said the neighbor, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
The house was flanking her. So, it begs the question, to what extent can this thing spread? Meaning, is there an epidemic? But we don't know because no one's ever done a lot of follow-up work on these cases because they come and go rather quickly. But again, I'd be willing to bet if we had run up Doris medical, looking for things, a good medical worker, we would have found that she's probably seizure-prone and or epileptic. She died in, I think, 1999 of cardiopulmonary arrest, but they don't know why that happened. She wasn't that old. She was pretty young, relatively speaking. Younger than certainly I am now. And, what made her heart stop? And her lungs were, we will never know. But this case, I discussed this in my book and on my website. The case is unique because what we photographed we never saw. What we saw we couldn't photograph. It doesn't make any sense. If you see it, you should be able to photograph it. When we were seeing these lights early on, I told everyone, don't talk to each other. Sit down and write down what you saw. Everyone saw the same thing. And at one point during the investigation, the lights, these greenish globs of light, coalesced in the bedroom, right near your doors. And they formed a large apparition from about the waist up. very large, probably at least 6'6", maybe 6'8". Sure. And it's a humanoid figure, and it's articulating, it's moving, and it's looking at us, and suddenly, boom, like a light going off. We fired, I don't know how many frames of film at it, 4 different cameras, and nothing showed up. Which, of course, makes no sense. So what was, bottom line, what was the story? We don't know. Paranormal. But I'm willing to bet if we ran her up a full workup on Doris, we'd find that she was seizure prone. And the consistency of this is so astounding that people can be seizure prone and never know it. In other words, you're never brought to the point of being kindled where it triggers an actual seizure. Now, this is where it gets, from my end, really bizarre. I left LA, I almost died in 2015, and I spent 21 months in a hospital. I was really sick. I won't go into detail on it because it's upsetting just to think about for me.
I can imagine,
Anyway,
brother. I'm glad you're doing well.
Yeah, finally. So moved in with a friend in the desert in Rancho Mirage. He had lived there for 13 years, nothing paranormal around. He knew me, but he had never had a paranormal encounter, ever. I moved in the house. Within 5 weeks, phenomena starts. Disembodied voices, things, machines turning on and off, luminous anomalies, like and going to sleep, and I feel something breathing on my right cheek and my right ear. I hear a woman's voice, and I jump up, and there's these lights swimming around the room, like green and red. I'm going like, what the hell is going on? Sitting on the couch watching TV. My friend was away. I was there alone. No dog, just me. And I hear a woman call my name to my right quite loudly, and I jumped off the couch because there was no one there. So we moved from that house to their house here in Palm Desert, and we think, nothing will happen here. 3.5 months, go by 4 months, phenomena start here. Luminous anomalies, disembodied voices, apparitions. I'll discuss some of this on Facebook. Amazing. Lights go on, a house lights up for no reason, things move, people talking, there's no one there. And why is this happening around me? It doesn't make sense. Then I discovered, was it 2019? Yeah, it was 2 years ago, that my friend I live with turns out to be seizure prone. What a coincidence.
Wow.
He's the power supply on the lens, on the focal plane. If I wasn't living here, nothing would be happening. Now, this is interesting. I worked on a case in 2005 and 6. It's on my website. The articles are called Cielo Drive Convergence, the Ultimate Field Laboratory. And I went to this house 21 times. It was a few minutes from where I lived in LA on Cielo Drive, the Omen case, OMAN. It won't go into detail. You can read it on my website. There are 2 lengthy articles. It will be in my new book.
Absolutely.
And what's amazing is I got sick there almost every time I went. Other people who had no previous knowledge, they had no prior illnesses, went in there, they got sick. 68% of the people who went through the house while I was investigating it became ill. Some very severely, others less so. But I kept going back there, and I had to end up going to the hospital the next day, almost every time, the ER.
That's awful.
And they said, you went to that house again. Yeah. Well, if it makes you sick, why do you keep going there? Because I'm learning things. It's clarifying a lot of information we've gathered. It's sort of bringing ends to meet. It's giving us knowledge we haven't had before. But it's making you sick. So, as of July of 2006, I stopped going. They have not returned since. I will not return unless I can build a suit that stops the geomagnetic field there is so strong that my body can't tolerate it. The field amplitude is so high.
We're gonna have to build you one of those suits. We're gonna take a collection for that. That's awesome. That's a great idea.
It would need like an astronaut's outfit. There could not be even a pinhole in it. You'd have to have your own pressurized air and cooling, literally like an astronaut's costume, but it would have to be shielded with Gyron or mu metal, which would make it really expensive. But hallucinations, luminous anomalies, disembodied voices, magnetic fields from 30 to 100 times the norm. Polarity shifts from front to back of the house. At one point, there was a storm coming in, lightning and rain over there, and one of my instruments, we got at one point 2,000 volts per meter. That's it. I was out of there. Shut everything down, and I went home. We had crews come up from different news stations, and their electronic trucks, electronically crashed in front of the house. Not mechanically crashed, but their systems were turned off.
Electronic interference.
And believe it or not, from what I've learned, the owner of the house he's a former epileptic. What a surprise. So, again, it's the same thing over and over. Faces and places may change, but the phenomena does not.
That is so cool.
Yeah, we know enough now that we could theoretically artificially trigger these things, but we run the risk of hurting people. We can't do that, so that's not going to happen. But let me jump to the next area, because we're approaching 4 o'clock on my end. Okay. Every so often, I've investigated a case of a close encounter of the third kind, or a CE1 or 2, or a CE4 abduction. Now, what gets really strange is, in ufology, if you read all the research that's been done by the qualified people, you discover that many abduction cases, after the abduction, there's paranormal fallout, spontaneous healings, out-of-body experiences, psychokinetic manifestation from the people who had the experience. Other times, it'll start as a poltergeist case and then sometimes evolve into an abduction. And this happened in several cases I've worked on, which are in my book and will be in my new book. In 1977, it was right near it was Valentine's Day, went out to investigate a case in Hollywood, and I already talked to the girl on the phone a few times. And so we walked in, and in my opinion, this girl was the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen in my life. She looked like she was built in a factory. She didn't look human. She was just so, for me, sort of like Liz Taylor with darker eyes. That basic look. Anyway, so we're there interviewing her and her ex-boyfriend. They've been together, and an actor was there. And we heard some strange things we couldn't explain. We interviewed them. Okay. Long and short of it, the girl had separated from her boyfriend, and her and I became involved. So everything was good, and it was a perfect relationship. She ended up working with us at UCLA as a volunteer. She worked in our site training groups. She was very good at it, by the way, and she worked on missing person cases with us. And okay, so that's how it started. It was a perfect relationship. I couldn't have asked for more. And she didn't appear to be whacked out or crazy, which I tend to retract. So everything's fine. And I kept having a dream, and I didn't discuss it with her. The dream was, in the dream, it was July 22nd, and the relationship ended. I didn't know why. And I thought, well, I shouldn't tell her because she misinterpreted it as wanting to get out of the relationship, which I did not want. So the dreams are coming, and I wrote it down. What am I going to do? I'm not going to tell her. So we were staying in a condo she had in the Hollywood Hills, and she claimed she was my age. She was actually 4 years older than me. It doesn't matter. So wake up one morning, and she's under the covers, and she's sighing, crying. Why didn't you help me? I go, with what? Last night. I go, what? When it happened? I go, what are you talking about? And she's still under the covers. She goes, didn't you know what happened to me? I go, what are you talking about? How could you not be woken up by it? I go, so she's talking. She says that she found herself being lifted out of bed, and then she moved horizontally, and she was in another room. It was metallic. She had a pedestal-like table. She was held down tightly at her ankles, her neck, her wrists, and her abdomen. And there are these little guys around her. No hair, big black eyes, gray aliens, and we know them today. and they're cutting and probing in her body, and she feels it, but they told her, don't be afraid.
Of course they do.
And
That's what
then
they always say.
she's back. Okay, so she's still on the covers, and I said to her, do you know anything about UFO abduction? She goes, what? UFO abduction? She goes, what's that? She had no idea what I was talking about. She believed in the paranormal, obviously, but not when it came to UFOs. So she finally comes out from another covers, and she's got around her neck, her ankles, her abdomen, and her wrist, she's got black and blue bruises, like she's been restrained too tight, too long. She's bleeding from her nose, bleeding from her ears, bleeding from her rectum, bleeding from her vaginal area, but she wasn't I didn't have a period. And looked like someone cut her hair and also took little scoops of flesh out of her back.
Wow.
And now what was weird is about all this is that I was in bed with her and nothing happened to me. And I always joke with people, say, I wouldn't take me. If I were them, I wouldn't take me. I'd drive them crazy. Tell me you had to propel this thing or I'm not leaving. But it wasn't fun to her. She had a complete breakdown after this.
That's
there were no
unfortunate.
psychiatrists and psychologists that would deal with this. It was considered, insanity, quackery. And she became a very unusual religious zealot. Very different. Dark. I won't even go into it. And had that not happened, whatever it was, we probably would have been married within a year. So as bad as it was for her and for us, it had to happen. Let it happen when we weren't married and living together. Now what's interesting, neighbors who obviously didn't know what happened to her, what she told me, coming back up to the condo one day, and this guy said, "Did you see that thing hovering over her the other night?" I go, "What?" This big glowing mass was hovering right over this area, and it knocked out the power. And we did have a 2-hour knockout of the power. But whatever that thing was, I don't know.
Didn't you have that experience yourself one time with another lady that you dated at one point? Didn't you have a questionable experience? I remember hearing you talk about it on Coast to Coast or some other show. I can't remember. But you said, I remember hearing you mention an incident where you were dating a woman and she said she had some little friends come visit her or something to that effect.
Oh, right. This is 1990. Beautiful blonde girl, sort of looked like Bo Derek, almost identical, looked like Bo Derek. So we were dating. I knew it wasn't going anywhere, so we weren't that compatible. So early on, she said, "Oh, look, Barry, I don't want to upset your worry, but I got a lot of friends who I think will be curious to meet you because of who you are, what you've been doing. I hope they don't scare you." I go, "What are you talking about?" "You'll know. Don't worry. Don't worry." I go, "What?" She says, "Don't worry. But I think they'll really be curious in you." Okay, so I forgot about it. And then some weeks later, we're sleeping, and I'm semi-conscious, and I can barely open my eyes. It's all fogged over, and I'm angled down. My head is angled down, which is really bad because too much blood flows to my head. I don't like that. My head felt like it would explode, and I was restrained on something hard, and I felt like weird static over my body. Okay, and then, suddenly I was awake in bed. It seemed like hours later. She said, "Did they hurt you?" I went, "What? Did they hurt you?" "Who?" "My friend." "Well, yeah, it wasn't too bad." I go, whatever it was. Okay, so that was 1990. Now, this is where it gets strange. We broke up. It didn't last. About 8 years ago, she popped up online. It was her. And she didn't remember that whole event. "Don't you remember? You lived in Santa Monica in this apartment, and remember?" No. I remember it very well. I remember what she looked like. I remember her furniture, everything. She didn't know how to cook. I could care less about that. But it was pretty strange. Now, we had another case of a executive from a TV series, a TV network, who Poltergeist case in the late 70s, and it was interesting. No children, young people around. We didn't have experiences. They seemed to be real normal. Sometime later, they were driving up north, taking a trip up north with their car, and they saw what they thought was a plane coming down in the valley to their right, so they followed the plane. The light came around a corner into the canyon, and they saw, oh, there's this disc on the ground, these little guys doing things on the ground. The little guys saw them, aimed a light at them, and then we woke up hours later on the freeway not knowing what happened.
Good gosh.
And they didn't want to go into hypnosis on it. They both became angry and irascible, and it's very hard to deal with. And they got divorced, and he lost his job, and he got another job similar, and lost that. And he was argumentative, and confrontational, and combative, and it wasn't good.
Usually it's not good.
He's had cases from all over the spectrum. And a lot of these are really normal people who don't need their lives screwed up by such an event. But the intriguing thing is the paranormal connection to this. And you can't prove it, you can't disprove it. But, I shoot one last story a little while here.
Please do.
In this new house we moved into in Palm Desert, so, things started happening. Luminous anomalies, disembodied voice. 2019, one night, I wake up, and it's really dark in my bedroom, but I can still see pretty well. The little light comes in through the shutter, the blind you can close. And I wake up, and I discovered that I wasn't alone in my bed. My head, which I thought was resting on a pillow, was not a pillow. It was a woman's left breast, and I look up, oh, there's a woman in bed next to me.
Goodness.
I couldn't tell the age, long dark hair, thin nose, high cheekbones, large eyes, couldn't see the eye color, and what? And I'm freaking out because I went to bed alone. There's no one in the place but me. And what? And I reach over, turn the light on the nightstand next to my bed, and the woman, whoever, goes, don't turn the light on, Barry. Don't turn the light on. What? Don't turn the light on. I go, what? So I turn the light on. Finally, I had to reach over her because she was a person was next to me, and there was nothing in the bed. There was long brown hair in the bed that didn't come from me.
Jeez.
Now, this is interesting. Then, about a year later, I get a call from a girl I lived with in Brentwood in 85 and 86 named Linda. And drop dead gorgeous when I was with her together. And I met her because she came to the lab. This director named Steve Carver, who passed away, was a really great guy. He brought a lot of people to the lab, actors, directors, producers, everything. And he brought her to the lab. And then years later, she wanted to meet me again. So anyway, we lived together, and it was really great. And just don't bore you with the details of what happened. In fact, I haven't talked to her or seen her since I left LA in 2015. And but she hadn't really talked to me since 2010. She got married and whatever. So she contacts me through a friend, and I talked to her. And she said, last year I had this dream that we were in bed together, and you got really frightened because you didn't know who I was, and turns out she does have really long hair now, which she never had when I knew her. And she said, you really frightened me, and then I found myself back in my own bed. Okay.
Wow, that's strange.
Another instance of bilocation or doppelganger or whatever. Then, and a few months later here, this is in 2019, I wake up one night, and there's something stuck in the underside of my right arm. And I'm sleeping on my right side. What? And I look up, and I see the three diminutive humanoids in my bedroom. What? Clear as a bell, I could see them. And they are aware that I'm awake and can see them. And they start bouncing off each other, and they pull this thing out of my arm, and it hurts, really. It burns. And there's blood, a little bit of blood coming out of me. What the? I get up, and they're gone. They just turn and go right through the wall on the other side of the room.
You know, I
I
heard,
get up.
I was talking to Daryl Sims the other day, and we were discussing this at length. And he was telling me about how that these entities have the ability to manipulate matter in time and space and just simply pass right through it.
Right, right. I mean, they went through my desk to the computer and the wall. So anyway, that happened, and I get up, and at first I cleaned my arm and put a bandage on it, addressed it, and all that, and then there was a horrible stench in my bedroom and in the hallway of hydrogen sulfide, really bad. God, what is this? So I sprayed the room with a deodorizer or whatever, which covered it up, and it was odd because about a few months after moving in here in 2017, I was taking up the garbage one night, and I looked left, and there was something hovering a couple of 100 feet up, and it wasn't a plane. I'm going, what? And I'm watching it. Huh? It was whitish and something rotating around it, and it went up higher, and it was pulsing. And then lower left, it pulsed and pulsed, and then like ejected. It fired some thing that came out of it, and then it got really bright, and it was gone.
Wow, that's incredible. I've had a
So,
lot of UFO sightings myself, including one when I was in the military, and I've had many of them actually. And at some point later on in the season of this program later this year, I'm going to go into that in more detail. But it sounds like you've had lots of experiences. Have you ever done hypnotic regression, or had somebody do any hypnotic regression on
yeah,
you?
I've had a few cases where I don't do it. But I've had people, I've been in a situation where I had professionals do that on cases we worked in. And, once you rule out all the logical explanation and the prosaic explanation, you're left with something extraordinary. And it's like with my ex-girlfriend from 1977. I can't prove it happened. I can't disprove. But I do know what people saw hovering over the area the night this supposedly happened. They have to make a bet. I bet that something related to this occurred. And as far as what happened in 2000, I don't know. I'm back in 1990. I have no idea what occurred. All I know is what I don't usually feel like my head's going down and I'm being strapped to something. But, and then what happened here in 2019 was, the humanoids and they pulling something out of my underside of my right arm. And, one time my friend and I in the kitchen talking one night, and I'm looking over his shoulder into another room, like a pool hall he built there, and suddenly the whole room lights up like an old-fashioned flashbulb went off. And what the hell was that? There's no light source. Things like that. So, I've led a different life than most people. But one last thing,
Sure,
close out here.
absolutely.
People think, it must be fun and interesting to be like this, to have these experiences, to do this work, to end up becoming your own research subject, which in a sense I have. But here's the problem. When I worked at UCLA in the lab, they do studies on me and whatever, the academicians working with me were around my parents' age. Dr. Moss was, I think, a year younger than my mom, I think it was, and my dad. And so there was all on. And to a person, male or female, they all thought I was an alien. I said, what, you lost your mind? Well, why? Well, you can do things other people can't. I go, so what? You ever met an alien? Do you know what an alien's like? No. Then why would, and I won't mention their names, there were two of the men who were so frightened they didn't want to be in a room with me. I'm going like, it's, then another guy, he was a psychologist and a sociologist who wrote a number of books that was mentioned in, and he thought I was an alien. I said, your logic is horrible. You're making gross assumptions. You're interpreting things based on what you don't know, not based on what you do know. Now, when I was applying for graduate school long ago, you have to two tests you had to take. One was graduate records exam. That's like having an SAT, but it's far more probing and it requires a lot more memory of all the studying you did when you were undergraduate college. Okay, no big deal. I did well on that. The other is called the Miller's Analogy Test, MAT. And I don't know if they still have this. And so word one is to word 2, and word 3 is to word 4. For word 4, you got 6 choices. So you want to see if the analogies match. Okay, so I took the test, and I came back. After the GRE came back really good, I remembered my schooling. But the MAT, the woman says, Barry, did you grow up here? Where? In LA? She goes, no, on the Earth. I went, what? Because you scored in the lowest percentile. Is that bad? She goes, yeah, you think differently than everyone else does. Yeah, that's bad. It's going to screw up your whole life. She was right. And one other thing, in 87, I went to women in one of my classes I was teaching. I forgot their name, but they took me to see a famous psychic in Long Beach, a mature woman. Never met her before. Don't remember her name. So I sit down, didn't know who I was. And she said, you're not supposed to be here. I said, well, tell me when I should come back. She said, no, you don't get it. You're not supposed to be here now. Okay, tell me when I should come back. No, you understand, it's a mistake you're here. I go, what are you talking about? You're not supposed to be here on Earth now.
Wow.
It's too early. It's a mistake.
That's bizarre.
And, okay. So, it's kind of like, okay, what am I supposed to do with that? I don't know.
What can you do with it?
Well, anyway, I've led a very, the human condition is pretty constant for most humans. You're born, you grow up, you get an education, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, you get old, and you die. So out of those, 7 things, I was born. I grew up, not vertically that much, but I grew up. I got an education. I never had a normal job. When I finished graduate school, I sent out hundreds of applications, snail mail. There was no internet, none of that. And hundreds of applications for getting a position as an assistant professorship, different places all over the world. And most of them didn't respond, and a few did, and they said, you have a lot of nerve asking us to hire a person like you. And I was, what? Apparently, by repeated appearances in the UCLA Bruin, the UCLA Monthly, the LA Times, the LA Herald Examiner, 2 episodes of Eye in LA, 2 on the Town, appearances in the front page of the View section of the LA Times in July of 1976, had a really bad effect on my ability to get a job. People say, you're crazy, you're nuts, you create controversy, people would be frightened of you, be a hostile work environment, we wouldn't get work done, people would be afraid to be around you.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Now, they were right. Let's see, if I'd already had a job and I just kept a low profile, but all the first media exposure I had, big one, was on LA from 1975, and Ghost Hunters. And they came to us and they said, let's not do talking heads. It's really boring. Let's do something different. What? Let's show the public what ghosts might be. They go, what? I took them to a holography laboratory I dealt with in Los Angeles. And we showed holograms. I talked about the relationship to apparitions and space-time and consciousness a little bit. And it was the first time holography was shown in this way on television. Got nominated for an Emmy. And the appearance in the front LA Times View section was the death knell of the lab. That's when we got too much exposure, and that's what helped kill us.
Well, Dr. Taff, this has been a really fascinating conversation. When is your new book? When do you project it's due to come out?
I have no idea. I'm a lot more work than the first one, and I don't know. I'm working on it. I can't even reveal the title because it's a really unique title that has never been used, and it's going to create a lot of controversy. It's going to make people question the reality we're in and how much freedom we have to do what we do.
Well, if it's anything as fascinating as Aliens Above, Ghosts Below, it's going to be a great book. Be sure, everybody, to check out Dr. Taff's book, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below, Explorations of the Unknown, and check out his website, www.barrytaff.com. barrytaff.net. And Dr. Taff, it's been a real pleasure to have you with us today. And we hope maybe after your new book comes out, maybe we can have you back sometime.
Sure. Sounds like a good idea. I'll let you know.
Well, please stay in touch. If you ever make it to Atlanta metropolitan area, let us know, and we'll take you out some good barbecue or something.
Definitely. Sounds great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, this has been Dr. Taff, parapsychologist, profiling the paranormal on Project Stargate. Thank you.